Well, I'm Ian Detterling. I'm a full-time composer, arranger, and orchestrator, and I compose Nocturnes and Dances. And I'd like to tell you just a little bit about myself, a little bit about the history behind Nocturnes and Dances, and then one or two things to listen for during the concert tomorrow. So I was born in Duluth, Minnesota. I grew up in northwestern Wisconsin in the small village of Poplar. I got a bachelor's of science and music degree from the University of Wisconsin-Superior, and then I went on to get a master's in music and composition at Stephen F. Austin State University in Nacogdoches, Texas. After graduating, I taught at a couple of universities at the College of St. Scholastica in Duluth and also at UW-Superior. In the music department, I taught musicology, ethnomusicology, and also music technology. But then after a few years, my commissions list as a composer grew to the point that I had to retire from teaching, and now I just compose full-time. It's a wonderful problem to have. So I got into music fairly early on when I was young. My sister had a lot of music, and I remember when I was in elementary school, she got a copy of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper album, and when I was in elementary school, I was obsessed with it. I listened to it over and over again. Then into middle school, my dad introduced me to the music of Jethro Tull and Led Zeppelin, and then that got me into playing music more. But before that, when I was younger, I sort of probably subconsciously really got into orchestral music from film scores. Specifically from scores from really old horror movies from the 1930s, 40s, and the 50s. There's a lot of composers that aren't really well known that composed a lot of brilliant music for these movies. Composers like Hans J. Salter, Frank Skinner, Charles Previn, Herman Stein, and even, of course, Max Steiner and Franz Waxman, which is actually a nice segue into the piece Nocturnes and Dances. The music from a lot of these movies really, I think, put a permanent influence on me as a composer. It informs my aesthetic preferences and choices when I write music. When I was in high school, then I purchased a legacy copy of Dracula, the original Dracula from 1931, starring Bela Lugosi. And in it, as a special feature on the DVD, you could watch it with a new score that was composed by Philip Glass. The original one doesn't have a film score, it's a movie without any music in it. And I watched it, and it was interesting. Midwest interesting, I guess. But it was definitely, it changed the movie, but it was more of kind of like an art piece with his music in the forefront with the movie happening behind the back, because a lot of the music was in competition with the dialogue throughout the majority of the film. So I would consider it, what a lot of people would consider a regular film score, but it's still a very interesting piece, and it kind of sparked a little interest in my mind that I wanted to do something similar to that. And of course, the other major horror film from 1931 that does not have a score is James Whale's Frankenstein, starring Boris Karloff as the creature. So then fast forward to, I was getting my degree at the University of Wisconsin-Superior, and for my final recital, I decided I wanted to write a full orchestral score for the movie. So I spent all summer and fall writing it, and it premiered on Halloween, October 31st, 2012. And I wrote the full orchestral score. I got these special sound libraries to make it sound as realistic as possible. I got all the audio files, and I synced it with the movie, and my recital is essentially coming in and pushing play on a DVD player and I'll watch the movie with my music synced to it. As far as the performance anxiety, that was the lowest for any recital that I've ever been a part of. It's brilliant. And with that, I was really happy with a lot of the music that I had written for the film, but with it being a movie, you're restricted by the music having to fit with what's happening on the screen. So if the music wants to go into this direction, but the movie's going into this direction, you have to follow the movie in order for the music to make sense, which of course that's how film scoring works. So what I wanted to do then after my recital, I wanted to take the music that I had come up with for the movie, all the little melodies and motifs, and create sort of a suite of different thematic materials that I used for the film score. So I got the majority of the first movement, second movement, and third movement completed, and then I moved to Texas to get my master's degree. And of course, life happened to get busy, and that just had to be put on the shelf for later. Fast forward to 2022, and Hector Landa, the piano prof at UW Superior, approached me, and I was teaching there at the time, saying that the MTNA student chapter is applying for a grant to have a new piece, commission a new piece that they could play for beyond forehand. I, of course, then scrambled to get a piece kind of churned out of nowhere. Now, for me as a composer, I prefer to compose at a glacial pace. I love the process of composing, just taking in a simple idea and then rewriting it again and again, and having dozens and dozens of different versions of the same idea, seeing what works, what doesn't, how it responds when you put it into different accompaniment material and all that. I just love that process. But of course, I wasn't able to really enjoy it that much because I had to crank out a new piece pretty much every week for an entire month to get this done. To speed up the process, I just went into this back catalog that I had of partially completed pieces. And in that were the 3 movements that I had worked on many years before from the Frankenstein soundtrack. So I adapted a number of cues then into multiple movements. The first one, movement 1, is taken some thematic material I used at the very beginning of the movie when Henry Frankenstein and his assistant Fritz are kind of crawling along these expressionistic and gothic cemeteries, digging up bodies and then going to the local gallows to get more bodies for his experiments. And just kind of so you can get this in your ear, I'll just play a short little segment of the main theme from the movement. Now the second movement was taken from a melody that I used, a sort of a Wagnerian approach to accompany Elizabeth in the movie. And she's kind of a very troubled person, tragic, and I wanted it to be, the music itself to be beautiful, but also have this sense of sadness connected to it. Then the third movement was taken later in the movie during the scene where it's the wedding day, and as you can see, they're about to be married and they just can't be happier. Not really. But so with this, with all of the events that had happened leading up to this, all the worries and this kind of brooding turbulence behind, it just kind of becomes more and more overwhelming as the piece unfolds. So that's the first 3 movements, and now for the commission for forehand piano, they wanted 4 movements, and so I had fast one, slow one, slow one, and I did have another cue that I could have used for this, but that one was even slower, which didn't really seem like a very logical choice for the final movement. So instead I went to another piece that I had worked on, partially completed and shelved. It was back in 2020, I got a message. I had recently actually just completed an arrangement for this clarinet ensemble somewhere in France, I think southern France, the entirety of Mussorgsky's Pictures and Exhibition. And they heard it, they liked it, and they said that they listened to some other music that I had written, and they liked that, and they were interested in commissioning me to write a new piece for them. And at that time, I had a couple weeks off from whatever it was I was doing, so I thought, sure, I'll work on this piece, and I'll see what I can get to in a few weeks. And sometimes when I'm composing music, it's a really uphill battle where it's almost like you're fighting the piece the whole time just to make every single thing work. And other times, it almost seems like the piece is just writing itself and you're just kind of holding on just to hopefully follow wherever it goes. And fortunately for me, that happened to be the thing. So in about, I think a week or two, I had about a 3 or 4 minute chunk of music that was fairly polished, I would say. Sent it to them, and they said, oh, this is all fine and stuff, but we were hoping more for like a big band jazz kind of a feel. Which really confused me because there's nothing that I've ever written that is even remotely big band jazz. So I reached out to them and said, well, what piece of mine did you want to be more like? And they never got back to me, which then I realized I think they reached out to the wrong composer on accident. So I had a partially completed piece for clarinet ensemble, which then I took this and adapted it for four-hand piano. And then that was the last movement. So I'll just play the main theme from here. And now that the fourth movement was originally written for clarinet ensemble, and the other movements I felt would work very well for a clarinet ensemble, I had in my mind an interest of adapting them the entire piece for clarinet ensemble. And then it was sometime in 2023 over YouTube, Margali and I connected, and then finally I was like, yes, let's adapt it, and then the Plattsburgh Clarinet Choir will premiere it, and here we are. Long story short with that. So, the composing process for me, when I write, I generally like to think that writing music is like creating these abstract stories where you get these little melodies, motivic ideas, or some sort of little pieces of musical grammar that are kind of like characters. And then the accompaniment material is the settings and how these different characters interact with one another in different settings. In my mind, not that they're necessarily representing characters or places, but that they are, in fact, themselves the characters and places. For me, that's kind of how I compose, just kind of give the music sort of a trajectory. So it goes from one place and it goes somewhere, like a story. With writing, I tend to like to start with just a very general idea. Sometimes they're incredibly basic, but then it's the little seed then that grows into a bigger idea. For the opening movement, it was a very simple idea. You have a chord on the downbeat, and then you add a note that is not in that chord, and then that note resolves to a note that is in the chord. So you have a dissonance that resolves, dissonance resolves. So just kind of get that in your mind, or in your ear. The first chord is D minor with an E that resolves down to a D, and the second chord is A major with a B flat that resolves down to A. So you'll hear that first, and then with the embellishments that make it a little bit closer to what the melody is. And then the melody. So it's a very basic idea, but then in the context of the clarinet choir, this is what then it turned into. Now, following along that idea of having dissonance on the downbeat, then resolving to resolving then, which is something that happens in music quite a bit anyway, I use that in the third movement as well, having these what are called sus chords on the downbeat, and then the suspended chord then resolves down. So it happens first in the key of B major. So you can think that major being a little more happy, then it goes again in G minor, which is a little bit sadder, and then it goes one more time in the key of E minor, but then when it resolves down, the resolving chord is a diminished chord, and it's a very kind of an unsettling chord. So that kind of then creates a little bit more turbulence as the piece unfolds. And then G minor. And then an E minor. Now putting that into the context of the piece with the melody on top, you can see here is B major. Same essential harmonies, but then just elaborate upon to show you how the melody fits in. And then when it comes back in G minor. Last time in E with diminished chords. Okay, so other times when I'm composing, instead of just a simple idea of dissonance and resolutions, I like to begin with sort of longer melodic material in mind. And kind of going to how I like to compose and sort of really just getting into and seeing what these different melodies are capable of, what their strengths are, and how they can react in different, with a different accompaniment material. I like to have, dozens and dozens of different versions of the same melody, which is great because then when it comes back, it's like, I want the music to kind of go in this direction. I can just kind of see, okay, which version, this one works, take that, take it into the next spot. And it kind of helps with my compositional process. So with this, kind of two different, it's the same melody, or a very similar melody, but just kind of approached differently, where the starting note is the same note. However, the harmonic chord that accompanies that note changes, and key center changes. So it starts on B flat, which is the third in G minor, and then when it comes back, the melody still starts on B flat, but it's has modulated then to the key of B minor, so it gives a different kind of sound. And then when it comes back, and then to hear this in the context of the piece. And when you think of just kind of formal structure of a piece of music, you have an idea, which is A, and there's essentially one of three things that you can do. You can just simply repeat the idea, so you get AA. You can repeat it, but then change something about it. It could be maybe change the harmonies or the rhythms or maybe even the instruments. So then it'd be like A asterisk. And then you could have something that's completely contrasting, so then it'd be like AB. Now for me personally, I like to gravitate towards having either AB, which would be contrasting, or repeating, but then have some sort of, have it change a little bit. And just simply having the melody start on a different note in the chord is a very easy way to make that change. So one other thing that I like to do is sometimes if there's a specific chord or a scale to gravitate towards, I use that as a starting point. It was a number of years ago, I think probably around the same time when I started writing the film score, I came across this one scale that I believe is considered to be some sort of Hungarian minor scale. It's, you can think of it as like a harmonic minor scale with a raised fourth. And it has, to my ear, just a very, for whatever reason, familiar sound to it, probably because there's a lot of what are called minor seconds in there, and I tend to gravitate towards that interval. And now remember I said that the fourth movement was kind of the oddball movement, and that was the only one that wasn't connected to Frankenstein at all. It does make use of this scale, as does the very first movement. So in the first movement, it's in G, so it uses the scale but based on G. it just has a very particular sound to it, and in the context of a piece, here's with everything else that's going on. And then the fourth movement uses the same scale, but instead of in G, it's in A. Now here it is in the context of the piece, and it does kind of deviate from the scale a little bit here and there, but for the most part it's based on that scale. And now just the last thing I'd like to talk about, of course this material started its life in other forms, either orchestral or on piano. Adapting from one type of instrument to another has with it certain problems that you have to overcome. There are certain things that you can do on a piano that are not very easy to do on a clarinet. Or if I were just simply copy and paste the piano parts to the clarinet parts, that's how you make a lot of people angry at you with wanting to have to play this stuff. So with this one particular thing in the third movement, arpeggiating chords on the piano is a really easy thing to do. You just kind of roll your hand and it's like it's nothing. So this is what it sounds like in the piano version of the piece. That would be very unforgiving to just throw that into a clarinet part. So instead what I did is I broke it up and then had it between clarinets 1, 2, and 3, where they're playing 8th notes and then triplet 16th notes, but they're staggered, so it's 16ths here, 16ths here, 16ths here, so it's being thrown around. So you get that feeling of constant triplet 16th notes, but it's much more idiomatic to play. And one last thing, going from the orchestra version to the clarinet ensemble version, I remember it was the ending of the first movement. I had it at the same tempo as the rest of the piece originally, and in the orchestral version, because there's certain things that the violins were doing up and down, that in the orchestra version, adapting that directly to the clarinet version, it just didn't seem to work as well. I'll show you, this is the orchestral version, original that I did 12 years ago. Last year when we were playing through it, because we premiered the first movement last year, it felt kind of flat in the clarinet version, so we changed it a little bit by changing the tempo and the dynamics. And just because the nature of the clarinet ensemble is quite different than orchestra, it just seemed to work much better. So this is what it turned into. So with that, those are just a couple things to keep an ear out for with performance tomorrow. Any questions, Will?
So do you write in a software program that they can play what you wrote?
Yes, yeah. So I use Sibelius, which is a notation program that is really, it's sort of like, you can think of it as typing in like Microsoft Word or something, and then if you push play, it would read it back to you. It's sort of a similar thing to that.
So then you choose your voicing and you can hear.
Yeah, so you can push play to kind of help if there's, it's especially useful to push play and then hear if there are any wrong notes or accidentals that you need to add or anything like that. Yeah, so it is a useful tool.
Beautiful work.
Oh, thank you.